Don't you sometimes feel like TV shows basically copy plots and paste them in different TV shows? Because that's kind of how I feel about iCarly and Hannah Montana in this one instance. And who is this poor actor playing the exact same role on two separate teen TV channels? Yeah, he could be the one, is essentially the same episode as I Date a Bad Boy from iCarly. Is iCarly ripping off Hannah Montana, or is Hannah Montana ripping off iCarly? Let's talk about what's actually going on in these episodes and get to the bottom of this. What's up, everybody? I'm Johnny2000, and for all your 2000s nostalgia content, make sure to subscribe and check out my videos. I recently did one on double episodes, about how networks break up their two-part episodes, which you guys might find interesting since this is kind of what that's about.
So when He Could Be the One came out on Disney Channel, the promotions really hyped it up because we saw that Brooke Shields and Cody Lindley would be in this episode again. And Cody Lindley is the guy who plays Jake Ryan, and Brooke Shields plays Miley's mom. Definitely a cool reason to find these two characters to come together when Miley has to make a really intense decision about who she wants to be with. Miley tries but fails to tell her dad that she's dating Jake Ryan again, so Robbie winds up believing that she's hiding something from him. To make her father thankful for Jake, she pretends that like her bad boy bandmate, Jesse, but gets in over her head and she starts to actually develop feelings for Jesse. The first episode is more focused on Miley's relationship with her dad and Jake Ryan being this big issue in their relationship. And there's that whole bad boy trope where it's like, of course you don't want your daughter being with a bad boy, but then the fact that she actually falls for him just shows like her age and immaturity. Like, of course that changes a lot of things. In the end, she tells Jesse that there's just something between her and Jake that's special, and the episode kind of ends with her dad accepting it, and we move on to Miley's real issue, which is choosing between Jake and Jesse. It already feels a little episodic by the end of the first part because of the fact that everything with Robbie Ray was resolved. It makes it seem like the momentum didn't necessarily build, and even though we kind of foreshadowed something that's going to be more important in the second episode, it still feels like two standalone episodes that just had a recurring plot or idea. It doesn't feel like it necessarily had to be a two-part episode so far. But then again, like, this was exciting because Brooke Shields was going to be a part of it and Cody Lindley, but I want to believe that it's not just a gimmick that they're doing a two-part episode, and it's actually really for a good storytelling reason. In the second part, she's trying to decide between Jesse and Jake, and it's really complicated, and some of the best songs are used in this, because the third Hannah Montana album is definitely one of my favorites, so I love listening to the song. Miley and Jesse share a moment, and then Miley and Jake share another moment, and it just becomes harder and harder for Miley to make a decision between the two people she has a history with. I mean, she barely has a history with Jesse, but you know what I mean. She sits on her back deck in the most famous scene that's in all the promos as she's looking at two pictures of the boys, which, why do you have two pictures of teenage boys in your room, Miley? I knew you were like lovesick, but not this much. Robbie offers her comforting advice, which kind of brings us back to the first part, which feels a little bit more conclusive. I like that it's called back from the first episode, makes it feel more necessary. Miley seeks advice from her mom and is able to actually make a decision. Miley ends up telling Jesse that she chooses Jake because of how much they have together and how special it is. Robbie accepts their relationship after confirming with Miley that she made the right choice, and it's up to her instead, which is a really good plot for a teenager episode. Like, I definitely feel like the stakes were high enough. The Jackson and Rico have a dance number this entire episode and keep coming back at really random parts of it, which is, I'm kind of here for it, although it does feel like, especially with summarizing the plot, that this is used just to fill up time. These shows should really use the 40 minutes super cautiously, and I wish they spent their time with it a little more. Jake has so far returned in every season, this being the third time, so at this point we know it's going to be a consistent thing. This is the first episode with the character Jesse, which is kind of weird because he's also Griffin in the iCarly episode in a very, very similar like plot. It's a little bit hard for me to respect this specific double episode. I definitely think Achy Jakey Heart was a little stronger despite the fact that that was broken up and this one wasn't. But you could tell why they tried to make it one part, because it's like very clear that this is one plot line going on for too long and not a lot changed and not a lot of momentum built until actually Miley has that final decision of choosing one of them. But there isn't necessarily like a lot of time with Jesse or even like a lot of time with Jake. I feel like Jake has only had like 4 or 5 episodes at this point. I mean, I do feel like that's more than most shows would be to develop a relationship with teens, and especially being like these shows are usually 60-90 episodes, so of course 5 episodes is actually a bigger chunk than normal. That would essentially be the equivalent to 20 episodes in a larger sitcom like The Big Bang Theory or any of these other shows.
Okay, let's talk about iCarly, I Date a Bad Boy. It surprisingly shares the same thing with Hannah Montana, where they aired as 2 different episodes in other countries, but here was promoted as a TV movie or one specific episode that lasted an hour. So Spencer's motorcycle gets stolen by a new boy in building named Griffin. Carly strongly dislikes him, and Spencer takes Griffin under his wing, much to her dismay. In a short time span, she grows to like him and actually kisses him. After Spencer walks in on them kissing, he grounds iCarly for till college. Carly deceives Spencer and tries to see Griffin at any time possible. Eventually, he gives his blessing and allows them to see each other. This whole first episode is very similar to the Hannah Montana one, where it's both Billy Ray and Spencer disapproving of Carly and Miley going out with this one specific actor. If I were this specific actor, I would honestly be a little offended that every show I went to, where the parental figures hated me. Both Carly and Miley look down on them as their bad boys, and I think that's very interesting because, of course, you have to have the main character not be that shallow, and yet somehow both of them still fall for him. iCarly is a much more grounded version of the Hannah Montana situation, which makes me think that the Hannah Montana episode didn't necessarily need to be a Hannah Montana episode. Like, I Date a Bad Boy is almost more fitting in iCarly's universe because she has a little bit more grounded issues, and Hannah Montana is focused on this double life, and that doesn't necessarily come up in this. Both Miley and Carly's relationships with their parental figure is usually very respectful. Like, they don't tend to act out much, and this is actually a really specific scenario where we see them disapprove, which we don't really see much. Then we get the second episode where Griffin invites Carly to his house, and she's shocked to learn that he collects and obsesses over Pee-wee babies. So this is really weird because, of course, this is what turns Carly off to him, and she basically doesn't like him anymore. I don't know, that's a little shallow to me. Suddenly, Spencer's issue is completely gone, and Carly doesn't care about his opinion anymore. And it doesn't seem like Spencer cares either. Same thing with Billy Ray. It seems like both episodes completely dropped the parental figure disapproving pretty quickly, which I wish that went on to the second episode, because why else would you guys do a 2-parter if the episode plots don't immediately go to the next? When Carly attempts to accept his weird hobby, she ends up laughing about it with Sam, and Griffin overhears and asks if she wants to break up because she is unable to respond. Which, yeah, Griffin, I would take that for sure. You know what? The only difference between this guy and the guy from Hannah Montana is the name change. Jesse and Griffin. I mean, honestly, like, I don't know why Jesse's a stereotypical bad boy name and Griffin isn't necessarily that. It also kind of reminds me of that Big Time Rush episode where one of them has to be a bad boy. They're not super closely aligned with each other, but it's still funny that in this era, bad boys were a term that people kind of clung to. And I feel like I don't really hear that as much, where people are like, oh, like, he's a bad boy, or people disapprove of bad boys. But Carly clearly breaks this trope when Griffin turns out to have Beanie Babies, meaning that he's sensitive, caring, and could have these positive qualities, and obviously that's a big turnoff to her and Sam. I feel like the term bad boy comes in with somebody who is not caring, emotionally distant, unable to receive criticism, and just all around inconsiderate, which makes me surprised why girls want to be with them. It's almost the objectification that we could fit guys into one stereotype, where it's like, oh, they don't want to get married, they don't want commitment, they don't want this, and then we put them under the title of bad boy. This really bothers me because it's like, I don't want to kind of give the next generation insight onto like, oh, you want to date somebody that either isn't approved by your parents, or I don't know, this is just a weird trope, but it is honest to the time. I feel like people saw being a bad boy as this elusive way of life that was really attractive. God, what the heck is wrong with my generation? I like Hannah Montana a little bit better in this sense because it's more about her choosing between Jesse and Jake as opposed to dating a bad boy in general. I mean, at least the second half is a little bit like that. The second half of both episodes really veer off to be their own thing, which I appreciate because the shows shouldn't be so closely aligned, but I still can't forgive that first part. With Hannah Montana, it's about her choosing between the guy she's really liked all this time and this new bad boy, which is a lot more interesting because I feel like if Carly were to choose between a sensitive guy with stuffed animals versus this guy Griffin, then the conversation would have a lot more depth to it. I like that Miley views these as two separate people and sees the positive traits in both of them, and that's just another example of when Disney Channel takes less cynical approaches to their sitcoms. I mean, we've had episodes where Miley really didn't want to be with somebody because they're too short or they're too this, like, so it definitely is within Miley's character to have those flaws when it comes to dating guys. But I like that she is genuinely trying to choose Griffin or Jake, and it's not, oh, she's trying to get over one and get to the other one. I feel like it makes the character a little bit more redeemable. It makes me look like down on Carly a little bit. I mean, come on, Carly, that's like so shallow. Like, it's one thing to have started out shallow and then changed your mind, but this is like kind of, you know, like you're not growing. Clearly you're retracting in your personality. The two subplots in the iCarly episode is one that Sam asks Freddie to make a website for her in order to put up all these disgusting videos she collected, which she does, and Sam ends up selling the website and makes $1,000. And then of course the second episode completely does a separate story where Sam is giving a recurring nightmare where a monster eats her soup and Spencer tries to help her get over her fear. See, these could have been done in every episode. I feel like if it comes to the double episode plot in general, Hannah Montana is gonna beat this out. And when it comes to the character development, I also think Hannah Montana is gonna beat this out. Then we got Drew Roy. Drew Roy is the guy who plays Jesse and Griffin. Right now he's 38, he's a Taurus. I don't know if that matters to any of you guys, but he appeared mostly in independent projects until he landed Griffin on iDate a Bad Boy. He was 23 at the time of iDate a Bad Boy coming out, and 7 years older than Miranda Cosgrove, and he's 6 years older than Miley Cyrus. I didn't realize Miley and Carly were literally almost the same age at the time of both of these episodes, but it looks like it's a really good breakout for this actor. Thank you guys so much for watching. Overall, iCarly came first, so I can only really give more credit to that, because Hannah Montana did come second, and the plot was less natural to its show. But also, like, there's so many times this happens, like, Disney's been first, Nickelodeon's been first. The only real difference between these shows are the characters in the shows, and I definitely think they distinguish the plots and really make it their own. Props to Drew Roy. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is Johnny 2000, and don't forget to subscribe.